Good morning and namaste, ladies and gentlemen, and a very warm welcome to the Economic Times World Leaders Forum 2026. I think we gave you a very energetic start, right? Everyone's feeling the beat, the energy. So, can we have a big round of applause? And this one's for all of you. Of course, throughout the day, I will be requesting you to applaud our panelists, our speakers. But this one, once again, for all of you. And a lot of our delegates who've been here for a while. So thank you so much. We have a great day lined up ahead for you. And I'm Pooja Yadav, your host. So now I'd like to tell you that we have a lot happening on this stage today. And much of it begins with a technology that has moved very quickly from possibility to practice. You've guessed it, right? We're talking about artificial intelligence. Now, AI is finding its way into businesses, products, and everyday experiences. In fact, it's changing the way companies are being built, how consumers are being served, but at the same time, making the security of these digital systems more urgent than ever. But this is only part of the conversation that's happening on the stage today. Across the day, we shall be moving through public leadership, the energy transition, manufacturing, and financial services as well. So expect the conversation to travel, and I'm expecting all of you to travel as well between the halls. So we'll keep it as flexible as possible. Before we begin, it takes a village, as they say. Well, it took a lot of partners to put this wonderful event together, and we'd like to take a moment to thank them. So, ladies and gentlemen, a big thank you to our presenting partner, Spec Finance, powered by Visa and co-powered by Switzerland and Casa Grande, our category partners, Google and RRP Defense Limited, our knowledge partner, PwC, and our state partners, the government of Madhya Pradesh, government of Bihar, government of Maharashtra, the government of Chhattisgarh, and the government of Uttarakhand. Also, a big thank you to our tourism partner, Delhi Tourism. We'd like to now highlight the role played by our associate partners, so a big thank you to them as well. IOB, Chennai Port Authority, GMDC, Skoda, Anant Technologies, Rasna Foundation, and Truecaller. And a big thank you to all of them for energizing us as well at the start of the day. So, ladies and gentlemen, again, if you hear some thoughts shared here on stage that get you thinking, that maybe you want to get into a debate with the person sitting next to you, please feel free to do that. And also, do share it with us online using the hashtag ETWLF and tag the Economic Times. We also have something wonderful available for all of you, and that is to connect with the people behind all of these ideas. Download the ETWLF networking app from the Apple App Store or the Google Play Store. So, what you can do is you can then connect directly with attendees and speakers from across the forum. So, as I said before, and I'll say it again, we have a full day, a very interesting and powerful day lined up ahead. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, welcome to the Economic Times World Leaders Forum 2026. So, as I said, I started the day talking about artificial intelligence. So, that's how we're going to begin. And with this one very pertinent question that every business eventually and actually has to answer, that what can AI actually deliver? For companies, this conversation is now moving beyond what AI can do, what it can demonstrate, to whether it can work reliably and at scale. So getting there involves almost every layer of the business. We're talking about the enterprise systems which are underneath it, the infrastructure that allows AI to run, the way companies understand their customers, and the security, of course, on top of all of it to keep it working safely. That journey, ladies and gentlemen, is at the heart of our first panel, from cloud to consumer, how AI is reshaping business. So without further ado, I'd like to invite our panelists joining us, our President Asia Pacific at SAP, Verena Siow. Welcome, ma'am. Global Chief Technology Officer of Nielsen, Anil Goel, co-founder and Chief Technology Officer of Adaption, Sudip Roy. Welcome, ma'am. Chief Executive Officer of Publicis Sapient, Nigel was, and President and Chief Executive Officer of Arctic Wolf, Nick Schneider. A warm welcome to all our panelists. Moderating the discussion is technology editor at the Economic Times, Surbhi Agarwal. So, can we please have a big round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, as we welcome our panelists and moderator to the stage? Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for the lovely introduction. Good morning, all of you. Thanks for being here. I hope you had a wonderful day one at the Economic Times World Leaders Forum and excited about the day two. I'm starting the day two with my very exciting panel. And I think thank all my panelists who flew from all over to be here and be sharing with us. Thank you once again. So I'd like to start this conversation by uh, by saying that we are, I think, in the third year of the AI hype cycle. Billions of dollars have gone into compute, into foundational models. But there are a lot of questions still about. So let me ask each one of you that how does it look from your lens? How does the coming, say, 2026 pan out? I start with the gorgeous lady on the left, really.
Thank you so much. Um, it has been a very exciting year, as you mentioned. This is the third year in the evolution of Gen AI. I mean, AI has been around for a long time, but we're talking about generative AI here. And what we see is that many companies are looking to move from pilot into production. There has been a lot of POCs, a lot of playing around the sandbox the last few years, but as companies are looking to see how they scale from pilot into production, it's all about business value and outcomes. How generative AI can bring those business value and outcomes to the organization.
Yeah. As Verena rightly said, the dialogue is starting to move from experimentation to outcomes. And when we think AI, a lot of us just thinks productivity, but AI is much more. You can get a lot better customer experience. Your ability to make decision improves dramatically. The speed and the new ideas AI can generate is where the real value is beyond productivity.
Right. So moving beyond experimentation.
Yeah, I would say there's two questions that you can think of. One is AI actually generating economic value today? And I think largely the answer to that is yes, and it has kind of been proven in many different use cases. There are, of course, like questions around like, is it justifying the investment, especially if you look more broadly at the amount of investment and infrastructure spending that is going into creating AI versus the economic value it's generating. It might seem a little lopsided right now, and that's largely because we are in this capacity building phase still, where the investment that is flowing into just creating AI largely outweighs the economic value, but that should shift within the next 5 years or so.
Right. So the economic value should shift in the next 5 years. Nigel, your take.
Look, I think in any business that, as was said, early on in the hype in the cycle, you've got this classic hype versus value discussion. For me, there is hype in the froth, if you will, in the way things are communicated, but there's real value in the underlying businesses that are redefining how work gets done. And I think you have a continuum there of businesses that have moved past the experimentation stage, particularly around areas like software development, research, and you're starting to see real meaningful value there. And you're seeing experimentation in other areas like targeted marketing and understanding how companies can actually change the customer experience. And I think that's a natural part of the continuum. For me, though, the real hype is in effectively the conversation being about how much is spent versus where the value is created. And I think we have to shift that narrative. Because if not, the only people that are gaining from this are folks in the building of AI as opposed to the folks using AI.
What about you?
Yeah, so I agree with all of the panelists here. Tough going last. But I think in our world, it's not only about the implementation of AI into the organization more broadly, but also about the predictability of what AI is going to do within your organization and the manner in which you're going to be able to secure and prove that you can trust what the various agents or the various AI use cases are doing within your business. And I think for our customers, for our business independently, it's not only about using AI, it's not only about finding the ROI of AI and making use of it from an economic standpoint, but also ensuring that the use of it doesn't put your business at risk in kind.
Right. Before we move to the next track, I was just saying that all the panelists, please feel come in wherever you have a point of view. This is a freewheeling conversation, and let's have some fun. Right. So my second question to probably I'll start with Nick over there. Nick, cybersecurity is emerging as one of the most important conversations, right, in every boardroom right now, even the challenges that we've seen in the last few months. Can we trust an agent to secure an agent? What are you seeing?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. We're asking if we can trust an agent to trust an agent, basically. Exactly. So, and I think the answer right now is broadly no, right? So now I'll caveat that with ensuring that you think through like what use cases, what data, what environment you're leveraging these agents for. There are certainly some use cases that you can trust an agent to do its work. There are certainly use cases that you could trust an agent to oversee what that agent is doing. But there are certainly other use cases where you absolutely wouldn't trust an agent or an agent protecting an agent to do what it was supposed to do within the environment. And I think as you look at any individual business or any individual customer or prospect you might be working with, each one of those variables changes depending on what their business looks like and what their priorities are. So I think for the near term, at least from a cybersecurity perspective, it will be very useful and beneficial for those use cases that carry more natural risk for the organization, that there still remains some human in the loop or some trust network that allows you to feel confident that the agent themselves and even the orchestrator of the agents, even if it is a machine, are doing what you expect them to do.
Yeah, if I can jump in, Surabhi. So security, when we think security, we think a lot of time data security and privacy. But with AI, the bigger risk is even, is it making the right decision? Is it giving you the right information? What I like to say is AI can be a seductive liar. You have to have the right guardrails. You have to have right evaluation mechanisms to make sure it's not drifting, it's not doing things it's not supposed to do.
And I don't think this is particularly different than the old human agent context. When companies actually moved to call centers and started recruiting large numbers of people, it was very similar questions about can you actually trust such a broad-based group of people accessing customers' data? And the only way, to the points being made, is you have to design systems and guardrails and context that allowed an organization to determine what was possible by which human agent. And in this case, I think in the context of AI agents, one of the biggest challenges I think we have is we're trying to deploy an agentic, technology into an unredesigned organizational context. And for me, trust is not a function of relying on technology or not relying on technology. It's the enterprise context, it's the guardrails, it's the humans around the technology and the technology, I think, that kind of start to move your trust coefficient higher.
And to add to that, I think we also need to think about having the right processes and governance in place. Yeah. Because you can have all the agents you want, but if there's no governance in place from an enterprise perspective, then things could go haywire.
Like you all said that we need proper guidelines and guardrails in place, right? But when we started the entire conversation about AI, then you started saying that how AI agents are going to be co-workers, right? We have workplaces, we have humans as well as AI agents, probably equal measure. Now the conversation has moved to a point where we talk about agents autonomously or independently doing most of the work. How comfortable organizations are now to hand over their business processes to agents? We will start with Verena.
Yes. Yeah, so I think that's really exciting that we can get agents to do more work, and that's what is in line with SAP's vision of an autonomous enterprise. You could have a lot of processes, tasks automated, and that's up to an organization, and that has to be built over time because trust is also gained with these agents and the technology over time. What's really important is all the underlying factors, right? Having the processes in place, and most importantly, having accurate and clean data underneath all of that, right? So the business context and business data is really, really important. But what I would say is that we can automate all the tasks and processes that we have, but the human is still very much in the center of it because you can automate process, but you cannot automate leadership.
right? So can automate process, but can't automate leadership. Nigel?
I think there's two things I think we have to think about in the way that work has evolved, right? Today, AI in most organizations is used almost like a dimmer switch to make everybody a little bit brighter, right? So that's the orientation, a little bit brighter. Because I think the realization organizations have come to is, for the most part, the first thing you can actually start to deploy agentic, orchestration against is remote corners of every function in the organization where there's a lot of repeatable process that humans shouldn't have been doing in the first place, right? So it's not replacing functional areas, it's replacing parts of functions, and in most cases, parts of what each individual person was doing. And so I think what you're now starting to see is, as that context has started to build up from agents actually operating in those areas, you're starting to get to now more complex decisioning, whether it's credit decisioning or settling trades in financial services or insurance adjudication in the context of insurance. And as you start to get to those more complex interactions, the enterprise context that you've established, the data sets that you've actually connected, and the human in the loop steps that you've built in have to work in concert toward delivering the results. I think we've moved from the chatbot phase to the agent phase, and I think there's still work to be done before we can move simply to the autonomous agent stage. And I think you can start to see that in very specific areas where processes or tasks are repeatable, and they can be automated easier. But the minute you actually start to get to more complex decisioning, I feel like we have to still bed in the human in the loop and agent phase more into almost every organization.
You have something to say? Yeah.
Yeah, well, I'll just add, so it also depends on what's at stake. If the stakes are low, we are a media intelligence company. So you have low value decisions like reviewing a report or reviewing the past spend. Those things AI can automate easily. But when you're building $1 billion spend plan, then human in the loop becomes very important. AI can still assist, it can present the draft plan, but ultimately somebody has to take accountability.
Right.
Yeah, I would say, like, from a technology point of view, use cases where the ultimate objective is easily verifiable are easiest to automate. You will get really good outcomes. You can always impose guardrails around what it can and cannot do. But if the objective is verifiable, then yes, it can be automated. There's obviously a lot of use cases where you require more subjective experience, which comes through either experience from within the enterprise that has been accumulated over decades. It requires judgment calls, and those are usually spaces where the agent works in consort with the human leaders or experienced engineers or businessmen to deliver the outcome.
One thing to just build
Sure.
on this same conversation we're having is we haven't touched on the economic impact of this, right? So when you actually start to think of some of these lower value tasks, the one thing you have to be really careful about, and we see this time and time again, where you deploy an engineer that costs you $60,000 and the token consumption cost is $200,000 to do a task that this person was able to do entirely by themselves. So you have to understand the economic argument of how you make these choices. In many cases, the usage of really big and complex models to do a task a small language model can do entirely simply. One of the things that we deploy in our platforms is the ability to make model choices on the basis of an individual task. So if somebody simply says, hi, you don't really want Fable to be responding to the hi, because the cost of doing that is extraordinary versus a small language model just responding to that and moving on to the more pertinent question. So I think these are some of the other things in the orchestration layer around agents that start to become really important as you actually start to determine where entire automation and autonomous agent functioning is value creating for the organization.
Right. I think, Nigel, you are in Sudip's alley, because at Adaption, they've been saying that how everything intelligent needs to adapt, and you don't necessarily need very powerful model for everything. So, Sudip, I want to come to you now and talk to us a little bit about how you think about how this should work, because right now a lot of conversation is who gets to build out and push out the most powerful model, and obviously a lot of money is riding on it. Does that need to change? Probably the bigger is not all right now the best, as per according to you.
Yeah, I guess a really like simple analogy today is like, we have the A350s, and even if someone actually wants to go from here to Noida, they're taking the A350, right? But ultimately, you kind of want the capability to match up to the complexity of the task that you are delivering, and that's kind of what we are trying to do with do at Adaption. The second thing is how do enterprises actually create an intelligence moat? Enterprises are very rich in the data that they have. A lot of the enterprises have like decades worth of data, and they're like looking for ways to how I can actually convert that into intelligence. And there, you essentially need AI that can actually not only understand the context, but also continuously learn. So if you deploy an AI in a production use case and it makes certain mistakes, you should be able to actually teach that AI so that it self-corrects and improves over and over time to get better and better. And that's kind of what we're trying to solve at Adaption as well.
Right. I want to come to you, Anil. I think very few understand data as good as Nielsen does, right? For the longest time, I think we've assessed how consumers use certain products, how they consume things, and then that has led to businesses making decisions, right? But how do we adapt for a situation where now agents are doing that work, where they are searching for products, they are recommending products, and probably very, very soon also making those final buys and decisions, right? So now how is your playbook changing? How are you advising businesses? How does their strategy and everything around product change with this new regime?
Yeah, Surbi, you're very right. The consumer behavior is changing. Whole paradigm of how we used to search, narrow down options, make a decision is changing, where now it's becoming more personalized, it's becoming more conversational, and agents playing a big role. In fact, one of our companies, Gracenote, did a study how consumers are identifying what programs to watch on TV and movie. And they found 49% of Gen Alpha is using AI agents to make recommendation rather than using search or traditional directories. So behavior is changing rapidly, which means organizations will have to adapt. You'll have to start thinking beyond SEO. You'll have to think how would you become not only discoverable by agent, but how would agent trust you? How would you be relevant? They're going to go beyond your search engine ranking, and that's where data-rich companies will play a big role in helping you make those decisions.
Nigel, you have a point of view on this?
Yeah, I think when you think about search engines in the early days of the internet, right? SEO became an art to understand how were these search engines determining how to rank your pages and your products. I think similarly now, GEO or AEO, so essentially looking at how you will think about citations, how you're producing content. You've got to start to think about producing content for the machine, and you've got to start to think about producing content for the human, because the human is going to respond to the brand and the affinity, but the machine is going to respond to the specifics. I also think the gap between the promise and reality starts to get closed very, very quickly. So often you see claims made in advertising that have nothing to do with reality, and I think this starts to get exposed very, very quickly. I mean, I was talking to the CEO of a bank just the other week, whose mortgage applications are starting to show up heavily in AI because all those long pages and pages and pages of terms and conditions that nobody reads before they sign a mortgage. Now folks were uploading this into AI saying, tell me if it matches with the 5 points and we're working with them to understand how to close that gap in the context of a very simple thing, because humans, we're never going to read the 64 pages of fine print around a mortgage. But an AI can very easily summarize those 64 pages and tell you whether they match the 5 points that you were making the decision on. And that gap is starting to get increasingly close. So as a brand and as a company, I think the promise and reality gap has got to be much, much tighter. And you've got to start to think about producing content to be consumed by 2 specific audiences, humans and machines.
Right. Coming back to Anil, with that, what Nigel said, right? Now you have to design products keeping in mind 2 separate categories, humans and machines. What are you recommending companies?
Well, there is a room for both. It's not going to be binary where agents do everything. Of course, areas which are highly structured, which are verifiable, as Sudip said earlier, where risk is lower, those will get more automated. the areas where stakes are high, where complexity of judgment is needed, where you need proprietary data in addition to domain knowledge, you will continue having human in the loop. And organizations need to start thinking about how do they categorize their use cases, where it makes sense to go fully autonomous versus where human will still add value.
Right. I want to come to you, Nick. Cybersecurity, like I said, is becoming very, very important, right? I want to understand from you that, as far as our reading goes, in the last couple of, I would not say even years, months, right, since we've seen these powerful models coming up with very, very powerful cybersecurity capabilities, the vulnerabilities have increased, the attacks have increased. How do you see this panning out? What are the opportunities and threats for you as a company at Arctic Wolf?
Yeah, so obviously this has been evolving very quickly. So, we are seeing now over the last 6 months, number of CVEs going up 10x from what they were just 12 months ago. Equally as important, and probably actually more importantly, we're seeing the time to exploit go to effectively zero. So what that means is by the time you are aware of a vulnerability in your environment, it has already been exploited, right? Whereas previously, like when I started in the industry, you had months to determine what you needed to do about a vulnerability that might be in your environment. And that gave the entire ecosystem time to breathe. I think it also bred in our industry a little bit of tool fatigue. So there was a tool for everything because you had a little bit more time to solve the problem. But now that you need to solve these problems effectively in real time or before they become known to the broader community, the speed with which you need to do these things has just completely evolved. Now there's obviously tools that are available to the defenders. There's some regulation and complexity with who gets those tools. I think oftentimes it is the smaller or medium-sized businesses that get less of a head start than the larger organizations. But at the end of the day, we should always remember that the bad actors are going to make use of the tools available. Unfortunately, they only have to be right once, and a defender has to really have their entire infrastructure, protected. So I think as we look forward here, it's going to be really, really important for organizations to be able to answer a fundamental question, which is how will you be able to respond to a vulnerability or a threat that is happening in real time within your environment? And are you set up as an organization to be able to deal with that, not only in a preventative measure or a detection and response measure where you're catching it before it really becomes a problem, but also what are you going to do if it actually has become a problem within your infrastructure and you have been breached? And I think that's changing the conversation with a lot of customers that we're talking to who have moved from, I think in many cases, especially 5-6 years ago, checking boxes in cybersecurity to feel like the threat is very real and very now. And I think the trick's going to be democratizing this at some level so you don't have a certain group of organizations or companies that have access to tools and technologies that allow them to be protected, but then the broad swath of the market that's effectively unprotected because all these organizations are working together with supply chains and everything else. And I think part of what we've talked about today is, you can leverage these agents to help you be secure. But how is an organization that isn't brought up in cybersecurity going to train an agent to do what it's supposed to do in the event of a breach? It's a 0 day that nobody knows. It's like really, really hard for an average organization to understand what to do about that. So you have to have the ability to bring trust to that equation. The only way that you can bring trust to any of these conversations is through experience and context, and then the data and the repetition to make sure that the agents are doing what you expect them to do, and you have kind of the knowledge and know-how to make use of it. So it's a really interesting environment that we're in. I think it will make a lot of changes to the way people work. I think there'll be a lot of changes to the way people think about risk within their organization. And you have to remember that when you turn on an agent to do a mundane task, that agent now goes to try to get credentials from different areas. It might get credentials from areas you didn't expect. And now that is in and of itself an attack surface that you haven't really thought about, right? So it's a very quickly evolving landscape.
Nick, you talked quite a bit about external threats, which is great. Love to also understand, what are you hearing from customer about accidental data leaks now with LLMs getting trained on your proprietary data, and that doesn't come as a security threat that's visible, but it could be as severe as that. Are you starting to see that, and How should we think about it?
Yeah, good question. So we have seen, so clearly the external threat is something that everyone always pays attention to. What's interesting is the external threats, one of the threats related to the external threat is data leak or data exfiltration. And now that what we're seeing is customers starting to worry about what their agents are doing and what those agents are sharing and with who, right? And by the way, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're sharing that information with people outside of the organization. They could also be sharing that information with people, with folks inside the organization or agents within inside the organization. And those agents were trained to share the data differently externally. So now they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, but with data they're not supposed to be doing it with. So there's a lot of complexity in terms of figuring out the governance around how you use these technologies. And I think we're in a situation where the adoption, the use case, the glitz and the glam of using these technologies and tools, I think quite frankly the pressure from the investment community and the market more broadly to use these tools faster and faster has outpaced our ability to kind of govern how they're going to be used in an individual organization. And that just leads to a significant increase in risk.
Yeah, I think maybe just to build on what Nick was saying, I think we talk about governance often in a very traditional context in this world today, right? Where we're thinking about people setting up rules. But a lot of these decisions are made in real time and have to be made in real time to be effective. So beyond cybersecurity, you know, as an example, if you think about the managing of IT systems for most organizations, that whole managed services space was reliant very much on a ticket-based approach. Somebody notices an issue, raises a ticket, then some people look at the issue, they resolve the ticket, and they close that, right? That process oftentimes relies on a lot of people doing first level, second level, third level support. One of the things we're seeing with platforms like our Sustain platform, which we deploy in the context of doing managed services, is that a lot of that governance has to be baked into the technology. If you don't bake it into the technology and you can't react to why is this iPad in the store not working? Is it because Apple did an operating system upgrade, or is there an issue with the app? If you simply wait for that in the traditional sense to be managed by a human process, the outcomes are still at human pace, even though you have AI intermediating in the middle. So I think this is one of those lowest common denominator factors, right? It certainly works in cybersecurity, but it applies to the broader IT ecosystem.
To take up on that point, this is a really good one, because I think we need to take a proactive approach to it, right? Just as when you sign up human users in the system with what SAP got a single sign-on with a profile and the use rights, we need to treat the agents the same way. They must be set up so that you know what they can do and what they can't do. I think that's really important, not to deal with after the fact, or you mentioned, but really, how do you proactively and have a strategy around it? Not just, you know, deploy agents and then they can go rogue, but having a proactive, preventive approach.
Right. I want to come back to Nick and ask a follow-up question. Nick, do you think that AI is in some way, like I think when you were answering my first question, you said that there is a difference in approach in larger companies and smaller companies, right? Smaller companies may not have the resources to instantly respond to the threats, the increase in threats that we are seeing because of AI. But is it also, AI is also sort of a leveler? Does that mean that smaller companies or mid-range companies have access to tools that they could earlier not afford? Do we see a positive there?
I think that will be the case in time. I think right now what we see is that larger organizations, in particular organizations in our world that have built out a security operation, meaning that they have a number of different tools, they understand how those tools interoperate, they understand how they work within their environment, but they also have the human expertise to make use of them in a way that works for their business. Those organizations, I think, are adopting AI, and it's somewhat natural. I think a lot of what we've talked about is like, think about the AI system the way that you train your team. You're just doing it a lot faster and in a lot more sophisticated manner. So those companies are very used to doing that. So they can leverage AI, they have teams to be able to do so, they have the expertise to be able to embed those workflows into an automated workflow, and they get, you know, outcomes at a better level or a higher efficacy than they would previously. I think for a lot of small enterprises, mid-markets, SMB organizations, they're kind of looking at the problem and going, whoa, like cybersecurity for me was difficult before, and I have 2 people on my team or 3 people on my team. I have a myriad of different tools, and now I'm being asked effectively to try to figure out how to implement these systems with threats coming at me far faster than they ever were before in a tool that, quite frankly, I don't have the expertise to tune, and or the history or the context to be able to train it appropriate in the first place, right? So I think sometimes we overthink like what AI is really doing or how you really make use of AI effectively. At the end of the day, you're not going to train an AI tool unless you actually know what you're doing with the tool or with the agent. And in order to do that, you have to be able to run these processes or these workflows in a way that you have high confidence that they're doing what you'd expect them to do. In finance or in sales or in customer success, that might be a little bit more easy for the average company. But for the average company, cybersecurity is still a little bit outside of their comfort zone, and now it's coming at them 1,000 miles an hour faster than it was previously.
Sudip?
Yeah, I would say, going beyond just like the security implications of it, if you look at AI adoption, I think it is in many ways a leveler, and in many ways actually gives an unfair advantage to some of the newer players, because when they are building their applications and platforms.
Unfair or fair?
I would say, yeah, a fair advantage in some ways, right? So, for instance, a one-person startup can actually use a marketing tool now, which instead of like hiring a full marketing department, right, which enterprises used to have, but now a individual founder can actually have access to like the same level of support and power, which I think, yeah, is in some sense like, I guess, fair.
No, I mean, absolutely. I mean, that's a great point that you're making, because we're already hearing about 2-3 people, teams touching $1 billion in revenues in the Valley and elsewhere. Verena?
Yes. No, I just wanted to add that I think in terms of small, medium-sized companies, they can gain so much more from AI because they have less resources in the large enterprises. So if you have a package offering that has got that's secure, has got embedded AI within the processes and the solutions, then there's so much more that value could bring to a small and medium-sized company, because they don't have the resources that large companies have. So technology is even more important to them, especially around AI.
Right. Verena, I want to come to you now and ask you, I think no conversation on AI is complete without talking about the impact, like Nigel said, on the economic impact of AI, which is obviously, while we are increasing productivity of processes, of organizations, we have to also think about what does it mean for employees, for jobs, and ultimately economic impact on the society, right? In that context, India has a unique problem. We have a demographic dividend, yet we have a problem of jobs. How do you see panning out for a country like India, and how does SAP look at it?
Yeah. So if I look at India, I think there is enormous potential, right? India has got the talent, it's got the ambition, it's got the skill, and it's got the ecosystem. So SAP is very vested here, not only from a customer perspective, with many of our customers here having been here for more than 30 years, but also from the talent perspective with labs in Bangalore, and also the ecosystem of partners that we have. And I think that while there's a lot of interest, like we talk about, the economic return and value is really important. And for I would say, still emerging country like India and many countries of that nature in Asia Pacific, labor costs may be relatively low as well. So I think as companies think about rolling out AI, that whole economic return and value is really important, that you have to balance the trade-off, whether, like we talked about, whether the investment in AI you need, does it balance off? But we see great potential from India, based on the later research that we have done with the Oxford Economics around the value of AI. India is looking to leapfrog ahead. In most of the India enterprises, we have interviewed plans to almost double the investment, and in fact, India is second in the world globally in terms of taking that very strategic approach to AI investments and adoption.
Right. Probably that's got to do with the fact that we probably have lesser technology debt as compared to other developed nations. I want to come to you, Anil, from your lens. I think India also has some of the largest consumer internet funded companies, right? Now, how can AI change that? How can AI take advantage of that to build bigger and bolder bets?
Yeah. India has a huge demographic premium, especially with our younger generation. Most of them are very easy AI adaptive, AI natives. And that creates a huge opportunity for us. While there is always risk of some disruption with any technology, I'm an optimist. Like every technology in the history have created more opportunity, and folks' ability to adapt, folks' ability to learn is going to make a difference. And that way, I believe India is poised very well with a lot of younger talent, younger founders taking advantage of AI.
Right. Sudip, you grew up in India, you went to IIT Kharagpur, and now you're a hot startup in the Valley. How would you compare the two ecosystems? How do you look at the Valley ecosystem, and how do you look at what is the kind of work that is happening in AI in India? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think India definitely has a lot of talent, right? Even if you look at the Valley, I think a lot of like the prominent researchers out there are essentially of Indian origin. They have probably even been educated in India and then they moved over there. And that's largely because there's like a self-reinforcement loop that, talented people want to stay closer to talented people. A lot of them are in the Valley. They want to go there. I would say India is offering a lot of interesting technical challenges, right, which arise out of just the sheer scale of the consumers. It arises out of the diversity in the languages that are spoken, in the type of workloads that they spawn. And yesterday, in a few of the panels, I heard essentially that people, it was encouraged that India should operate only at the applications layer or at the services and solutions layer, which is like more in the LLM ops. But I actually think there's a tremendous potential for India to also do deep tech, do research right from the chip upwards across the full stack. And I already see some of that in some of the startups, even in Bangalore.
Right, there's a lot of interesting work in deep techs coming out of India. Nigel, I want your thoughts on the IT services model. How is AI challenging that, and what does it mean for jobs?
I think, look, there's a huge opportunity if India can leverage the potential of the IT services industry to help people reimagine work in the context of AI. I think if it continues to be a cost arbitration focused model, I think they'll start to see a lot of disruption in certain tiers of that industry. But I think most organizations recognize that the opportunity to reimagine work is probably going to need more, not less people as AI accelerates. Because you have, to your earlier point, a huge amount of tech debt. And all of this has to be AI-led as opposed to simply people-led.
Nick, the last word on you on this. What are the opportunities that you see in India for Arctic Wolf?
Yeah, I think we are executing against what we see today, right? So we've made a massive investment in India. We're reimagining, in particular, the way in which the Security Operations Center historically worked. And we're doing that through empowering our employees to be able to do things that, quite frankly, they wouldn't have been able to do before by leveraging the technology to do some of the things that we talked about earlier that probably should have never been done by a human, that now frees up time for these organizations to not only be able to get a better outcome more effectively, but also time for our employees, and in particular our employees in India, to spend time thinking about the hard problems that a mid-market account or an enterprise account might face with regards to cybersecurity, and how to solve those problems by using the technology versus historically in our industry, a very human-first solution.
Right. But I want to also ask you that how does a country which has built a very strong digital public infrastructure with Aadhaar and UPI make sure that we ward against the increased threats because of AI and protect a billion users?
Yeah, so I get this question a lot. At the end of the day, a lot of the same blocking and tackling that was always applicable in cybersecurity is applicable today. It's just more important to make sure that you're paying attention to it today and that you're on top of the evolving threats that are happening within the infrastructure. And whether you can do that internally, great. If you can't do that internally, finding a partner that can do that for you, and in particular a partner that can leverage the new technologies in your defense, is a big step forward.
Right, we'll close with that. Thank you so much for being such a lovely panel, and thank you to all of you for listening in. Have a good day ahead. Thank you.
A big thank you to all our panelists, our moderator. Can we please have a big round of applause, ladies and gentlemen? Brilliant way to kickstart the day and set the momentum. Sometimes I think about AI and risk as in In India, I think our cars are just coming, more snazzier and the best models and so many of them, but the roads are not being built at the same pace, right? So it's kind of like a catch-up game. Thank you so much once again. Well, we're still sticking with the subject of artificial intelligence, but we're going to change the starting point in our next panel. So, of course, a lot of businesses are already built, they're functioning, and now that AI has come into the picture, they are asking how to add AI to what they already do. But what happens when AI isn't added later? What happens when the product, the team, and the company itself are built around it from day one? So, ladies and gentlemen, this is what we're going to be capturing. That's at the heart of our next panel. It's titled Beyond the Chatbot, Building AI Native Companies. And interestingly, the people who we have joining us on stage are going to be addressing the question from very different sides of the building process. So it promises to be a riveting session. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, our stage is set. Joining us are Founder and Chief Executive Officer of Fireflies.ai, Krish Ramaneni. Co-founder, welcome, a warm welcome to you. Co-founder and Chief Executive Officer of Whisper, Tane Kothari. Managing Director at Peak 15, Shailendra Singh. And Founder and Chief Executive Officer of Seema.ai, Krishna Rangasai. Welcome, sirs. Moderating this discussion and taking it forward is Senior Editor at the Economic Times, Samidhar Sharma. Let's welcome our panelists and our moderator with a round of applause, please, ladies and gentlemen. Beyond the Chatbot, Building AI Native Companies.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, everyone here. I know some of you are sleep deprived and jet lagged. Okay, I don't know about you, but so I'm going to keep it light, as instructed by Shailendra. Some old friends on the panel. We're going to be talking about beyond chatbots and building AI native companies. I think we have a good mix today. I'm going to just sort of take a bit of a broader view of how do we kind of define AI native companies. I mean, this sounds a lot like everybody 15 years back calling themselves mobile first. So, Tanay, do you want to start, and maybe Krish, because you guys do stuff which can be called features and what a lot of people say wrappers, you know? So how do you kind of build a moat calling yourself AI native and defend a business which is built on top of, you know, stuff which already exists?
So I think the definition of AI native keeps changing over the years. And what it used to mean about a year ago was in your company, in your products, you are using the latest AI models to say, power a chatbot, power AI search, power it taking automatic workflows. I think today, given that that has now become the norm, what AI native means to me and what we really think about is you're solving as a business a very specific problem for your users. And what you've realized is there is a missing gap that is preventing the experience from being phenomenal. And so you are now starting to build the models yourself. It could be kind of doing some fine tuning on top of them. And a lot of times for companies, when you start to build a real moat, you are building purpose-built AI solutions for those specific experiences. And so that, at the end of the day, is what continues to build a moat. And so the way to build a moat has not changed over the years. It still is really simple, which is you need to just understand your customers better than any of your competitors.
Krish?
Yeah. Well,
You have a lot of competition in the space that you operate in. How do you kind of make it defensible?
Well, one is when we first started, people thought we were crazy. There was no such thing as AI note takers. It was so cheap for us to buy the domain AInotetaker.com back then, and now every week there's a new AI note taker in the market. So this is a common question that VCs and others ask. One of the main things is any company that starts off, even if it was a wrapper or something that's making an LLM call, over time it hardens, it solidifies, you build a lot of enterprise business logic into it, and that's where you really get a chance to differentiate, especially with software, how fast it's being built and how quickly it's changing, not just with the models, but also the experience. And historically, right, we focus a lot on businesses and we build software for businesses. If anyone in the crowd has used business software, it was very unintuitive for multiple decades. You're putting in all this information into these systems of records, but then those systems of records are not actually intelligent. Whereas now, things are changing where the AI is supposed to actually do the work for you. It's supposed to tell you and advise you on like what you should actually be doing, rather than you telling the AI. So that's where we build like a large moat.
So I want to come to Shailendra and then Krishna. While Tanya and Krish talk about creating value, at the layer that they operate in, Shailendra, we're seeing disproportionate amounts of capital going into the model companies. I mean, there's reports of Anthropic, looking to do a valuation of $2 trillion. How do you deploy capital you are an investor, you participated in Whisperflow's recent funding round. How do you kind of take a call to deploy capital in a world where model companies are literally eating everybody for breakfast, lunch, and dinner?
Well, first, Samita, thank you for having me. Very honored to be here. Let me start by
We don't see you much in India, so it's actually,
No, I'm in India every month. I'm not at very many speaking events,
Yes.
but I'm in India every month. First, let me start by saying, I really feel I have never felt not smart enough in life as much as I have felt in this AI cycle. Every few months, this cycle, unlike prior cycles, changes so fast, and I think the pace of learning has to be so quick.
Yeah.
I think this AI cycle is super humbling, and I'm definitely no expert. These guys are all here practitioners, and at best we are a student and trying to learn from them and keep up with all the amazing founders. So first, let me just caveat that, because I think whatever I say, like I said, the first thing is, every few months we feel like why didn't we get this earlier? Like we should have been onto this even before.
Yeah.
And I think some of the reason we feel like that is because the state of the art keeps changing, and this is the fastest evolving of any space we have seen in our careers. Second, I think also the scale is extraordinary. Okay, like this has never been witnessed before in history of tech, because many things were building up to this. Hardware infrastructure was building up to it, cloud services was building up to it, distribution platforms were building up to it. You talked about Anthropic. Let's just think about Anthropic for 1 second. They're expected to go from 10 billion at the start of the year to 100 billion plus at the end of the year.
Yeah.
Okay, like 140 per. We are not a shareholder in Anthropic, so I don't have any MNPI or private information. But but let's just think about that for a second. If Anthropic was 100x smaller, 100x smaller, only 1% of its size,
Yeah.
it would be going from 100 million revenue to a 1.4 billion revenue in 1 year.
Correct.
I think it would still be a top 3 or top 5 global AI company at 1% of its own scale. So I think this type of scale has never been witnessed. It was not seen at Meta. It was not seen at Google. So I think this AI cycle, what it's doing is, this cycle is it's very deeply transformational. If you ask the question, what is AI native? To me,
Yeah.
anything with a self-learning system, when technology becomes better on its own by interacting with humans or whatever, so what you're buying is not workflows or system of record, but you're buying intelligence, and you're buying something that keeps improving. That's pretty spooky, actually.
Yeah.
Think about it, right? And so I think that's why AI is so powerful. I will also say quite likely 99% of people in this room, maybe except a few people here and some others who are building, are vastly underestimating how much everybody's life will change. And the things we get pitched now,
Yeah.
again, like I said, every week we feel we're not smart enough. We are reading white papers. Yesterday I was talking to the team saying, should we hire physicists to the team? Should we hire biologists to the team? Because basically AI will transform so many areas, and I think we are still pretty early. So how do we think about investing? We are learning a lot.
But is it tougher for you? And like you said, you're not an Anthropic. If you do not have a presence in some of these crazily valued companies, where do you kind of, I mean, most of the value is being still accrued there.
Actually, the funny thing is, if I may say so myself, I think VCs have become somewhat marginal in this AI cycle.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you for saying that.
Because look, again, the quantums of money being raised and the size of companies being created.
Yeah.
I think for the people in the room, every large enterprise should be investing in AI. You saw recently HCL invested in Sarvam.
Yes.
I think some more might invest in Sarvam, but I mean, this has happened. If you think about the gains generated by Google in SpaceX and Anthropic, or Amazon's stake in Anthropic, I think it's one order of magnitude bigger than any VC firm.
Correct.
Or significantly larger than any VC firm.
Yeah.
So I think obviously kudos to Spark, kudos to Menlo for doing Anthropic. Like some firms have just crushed it on it.
Yeah.
And then
Lightspeed as well.
Yeah, many others.
Yeah.
But I really think this cycle is so big that enterprises need to be funding it, not just VCs. VCs can only spark things and get you started off.
Yeah. Yeah.
So look, obviously the most challenging and the most exciting time to be an investor, extremely humbling. Like I said, again, I'll reinforce, like we are a student and we are trying to just, look at a few slices where we have high conviction. So we have very high conviction around, for example, this core profound idea that, at least since I was a kid, the one thing short supply in the world was software engineers. And, you had tech debt everywhere, you had mainframes working, you had all these things you kept hearing about, you had software platforms lasting for decades because the skills had run out to re-platform those things, or there was too much tech debt to be paid. I mean, it's so profound that software can now be written so quickly and rapidly, and not just vibe coding, but kernel. Yesterday I was with people in building GPUs, and they were talking about how they use agents to write kernel software, okay, for silicon. And that's pretty dramatic, right? So I think we are early in this cycle, and we are all likely underestimating it. We feel like that ourselves, even though we are trying to remain very switched on for the last 2-3 years.
Yeah.
But all these gentlemen are at the
so Krishna, you can jump in and talk a bit about physical AI. I mean, we had a short chat, before our session, and you're also in the midst of raising new capital. You've actually been around for 7 years. Tell us a bit about SEMA AI and how you're kind of working with machine learning and all of the stuff that you're doing with your clients across robotics, drones, etc.
Thank you for inviting and really appreciate being here. So we focus on what's broadly a category called physical AI.
Correct.
This is where AI is not on the cloud, but it's on device, on our silicon, but it's really processing right where the data is being created. The volume applications for us tends to be robotics, automotive, drones, and industrial automation. These tend to be the categories we participate in. I think cloud has taken, if you will, an entirely different persona for what I think everybody shared so far. But if you really think through it, the physical world we live in is much bigger a construct than cloud. Our thesis is that today everything is overly abused in the cloud, and for reasons of either privacy or security, eventually total cost of ownership, or for even latency, in which from capturing the data to processing, you need a few applications to be right where the data is. You're going to see a natural balance between the physical world and the cloud. So we are entirely and exclusively focused on solving physical AI problems.
Yeah. How do you compete with someone like NVIDIA, which is largely focused on cloud AI? And is there any attempt from your side to kind of get into that space?
Sure. I think we are honored to compete with a $5 trillion entity and have a David versus Goliath fight every day. But obviously, as a startup, we have the luxury of building something clean slate. I don't have a heritage of a GPU legacy, if you will, right? So we have our strengths. in the physical world, while performance matters, performance power efficiency is really key.
Okay.
So we are consistently 10x of NVIDIA, which is not easy to do, but as a startup, unfortunately, that's table stakes. You need to bring something spectacularly different for customers to care about. The second one is, unlike the cloud, the volume per customer in physical AI and robotics and automotive is a very small number.
Yeah.
So we need an entirely amazing software experience. So people want to get the AI experience without the learning curve. So those are the two superpowers that we have. But and I would say I don't wear a leather jacket every day, but we are giving our friends at NVIDIA a good run for their money. So.
Okay. Tara, you're obviously, in the voice AI space, text to voice to text. How do you see that, sort of evolving? Especially, I mean, if you look at markets like India, it's sort of, you last when we met, you said it was actually the biggest revenue generating, market for you as well, and not only user numbers, which is typically the case for a lot of companies. How do you see that sort of evolving? Has it been able to kind of exceed your expectations in terms of, the market itself here in India?
Yeah. By the way, quick clarification, it was the second largest after the US when we were chatting. And India to me isn't one country. It's, I think of these as concentric circles of different kind of audiences. You have kind of the extremely tech-savvy population that's usually living in Bangalore and Delhi. They're very early adopters, and that feels very similar to San Francisco. And we saw massive adoption there earlier this year. And then it started to trickle down into the next category, which we think about as Tier 1 India. These are the kinds of people who use Zomato and Uber, and most of the people here in the audience likely. But then I think there's a massive opportunity when you think about Tier 2, Tier 3 India, when you think about building for the average person, building for the Kisans, and like what that would look like. And so this is both on how we think about kind of building for India, and how I also think India should be pursuing AI as well. Is doesn't make sense to copy whatever is happening in the US. Right, you can buy Claude Code for $200 a month, which is 20,000 rupees, and that is so expensive for a majority of the population. And so India comes with its own set of unique challenges, which is dozens of languages. You need to be extremely cost efficient. You need to be kind of especially aligned with the Jugaad mindset that goes on. And so the kinds of problems you need to solve is just fundamentally different. And so when we think about the Indian market, what we're thinking about is how can we build experiences that we can give to somebody for 1 rupee or 2 rupees, and they can actually use that. So there's a different kind of innovation layer that you need to really build there. And so when I look at some of the kind of leading AI companies that are being built here, for example, BharatGen is one of them, and there's a number of others which I'm really proud to see. Those are the kinds of challenges that they're solving, and I think that's really where India can make its mark. And that's where we've always made our mark, when we see how ISRO compares as compared to NASA and so on and so forth.
Sure.
And so kind of coming back to what that means for Whisper overall, I think India is fundamentally a voice-first company. Country. And we love talking on phones. We love sending voice messages. We love talking to people around us. And so it feels like Whisper is a product that's just built for India. And so to me, I don't think of Whisper as an AI product that people should use. It's basic infrastructure. Because what it does is, if you think about most of the people who are now using cell phones or computers, they got access to it just a few years ago. They're not the fastest typers. They type like this on their phone. And for a lot of people like that, what voice technology does is it enables them to use technology, period, and then you can enable them to use kind of everything else that gets built on top of that.
Is there, and maybe Shailendra, you can, tell us a bit about, is there a lot which was expected from the voice AI segment in terms of, how it will evolve in India? and what it actually has been? Because there was a lot of euphoria about a year ago, but we haven't seen the kind of scale in the voice space. Is that something that you've noticed?
Actually, I think the voice companies here are growing pretty fast. If you compare them to any other domestic application category, I think voice AI is probably the fastest to take off. You know, 11 Labs, I know anecdotally they have a pretty big business in India. Whisper has a very big business in India, and many others. There are 3-4 funded companies, all seeing pretty rapid growth. Look, you know, India is not the type of market where a company can win a 10 million contract right away. Like, you know, so it's not. I don't think we'll see US type scaling, but there's no question that there's very strong PMF. And voice is one of those killer use cases, I think, for AI, because look, there's two reasons. One, all these people who don't use technology well can use technology well with voice. And the second, even more powerful reason is, and you know, Tanay and us chatted about this when we were investing, all of AI is based on context. All intelligence is based on context and on a model learning your context. And actually, voice is a superior method of delivering context to a model than the text chatbot is. So when you think about beyond the chatbot, actually voice is a superior mechanism because it's more unstructured and you can deliver significantly more information or context, which is why one amazing way in which Whisper gets used, it gets used to prompt models, and you will constantly see developers write their prompts using Whisper because then they can write much longer prompts and tell the model what to do. And I've myself witnessed it, you know, with founders we've met, and they love it.
Krish, do you want to talk a bit about, you know, the space that you're in? How do you kind of see it growing? Would you, you know, is the number of players too many? Are, you know, I mean, there's Microsoft, which Google, all of these embed all of, you know, the features that you offer on their platforms. How do you kind of exist independently and grow and scale in a hyper-competitive space like yours?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'll first start by addressing the voice AI in India and then get into this because it's both is connected. So I always tell my team that if you can build AI for India, you can build for anywhere in the world because of the complexity of it. We support over 100 different languages. And India alone, if you have 22 plus different languages, accents, and even if you're taking meetings where there's noisy situations, you sometimes have low reception for data, you have to be able to like work in all sorts of those conditions. The other thing is Indian customers have very, very high expectations. So they want incredible products, but you also have to deliver it in a very affordable way. So if I was taking a look at our metrics the other day, and the number of meetings and minutes and hours, if we put it all together over the last couple of years, it's equivalent to tens of thousands of hours of conversations. Tens of thousands of years, actually, of conversations that have happened. So billions, it's in the billions. And if you had to take those billions of conversations and run it on the cost that when we first started, it would cost us $3.5 billion. Obviously, we did not spend $3.5 billion, but if the models and everything was there at that scale, it would have been. So one of the nice things is, as the infra companies, as the model companies continue to innovate, and intelligence becomes cheaper, so when it becomes 10x cheaper, you're going to use it 100x more. And the advantage for what we're able to do is when you have a company that's used Fireflies for years and years and years, you have a lot of that context to be able to help them do actually the work. So I always like to say Fireflies has always been evolving from being this note taker to an action taker because there's so much work that happens before a meeting. You have to prep for a meeting, you have to get briefed, and then there's all this work that has to happen after a meeting. You have to have your slide decks ready, your email sent. So that's one of the ways we've been expanding. And the last part is when Google builds AI for meetings, they're going to really only do it for Google Meet. When Microsoft builds AI, they're only going to do it for Teams. But the whole conversational ecosystem is very fragmented. Knowledge is fragmented. People use tons of different tools. Even if you are using an entire Microsoft stack, your customers might be using Google. So one of the nice things about what we've seen with Fireflies being adopted across hundreds of thousands of organizations is they really would like one AI that works consistently with all the players, works with Teams, works with Slack, works with Zoom. So that's been actually a huge advantage. And if anything, it's led to more people learning about the space and wanting to look at what is the best-in-class provider for that, rather than can I just get a bundled solution that just checks the box.
Yeah. And Krishna, I want you to talk a bit about, India as a market for physical AI. You mentioned that drones is something that is kind of got a lot of, stuff happening here in India. What really are you seeing in the market, considering you must be talking to a lot of prospective, clients here?
We do. I think if I were to pick market categories in India, drones, for obvious reasons, have become really front and central. Not just drones, but drone detection, drone deterrence.
Okay.
It's amazing. 3 years ago, it's probably 3 or 4 drone companies in India. Today, I don't know if any company is not a drone company. So it seems like top of mind for everybody. What we're seeing is really a good groundswell for robotics, industrial automation, and automotive. And I think extending on the conversation around voice, I think conversational AI is a broad horizontal that's going across all categories. I think a technical term we end up living is called multimodal, which is that it's voice in combination with video, with text, maybe even sensory or haptic feedback. I think just like human beings really sense, it all creates for better context and for better decision making. But if I were to pick for market categories that 3-5 years from now, India could really lead the global product market, I think it'd be robotics and industrial automation.
And you've taken the call not to be in China. Can you talk us about why you would do that, considering robotics is something that, the Chinese market has actually been pretty, aggressive about? And
yeah, no, I think I'll start with familiarity breeds contempt. I built multi-billion-dollar businesses in my previous company in China, and I really worry that I think that society is way more advanced than any other society today. In my humble opinion, I think they're far ahead of the US by 5 years already, right? So they are ahead both by deployment in models, more importantly, physical models. I mean, I think there's a lot of hype around LLM elements, but really in physical models and clearly in supply chain, they're really quite ahead. And obviously, I think I'm of a belief system where the Western society should stay ahead. At least that's my belief system. So we don't want to bring world-class technology and further add fuel to already is a fire.
very different from how Jensen thinks of China.
As I told you, I don't wear a leather jacket. but our perspective is that I think we want to really bring, my last point on this topic is, while ChatGPTs and Claudes and Codexes of the world are top of mind today, national sovereignty and ownership of protecting borders is going to become the most critical topic on AI.
Yeah.
And that's not going to happen in the cloud, but it'll happen in the physical world, where aerospace and defense, protection of borders, manufacturing sovereignty are going to become very critical topics that define nations going forward. And we want to bet on the Western Hemisphere. And this is why we are not hugging our friends in China in providing what we believe is best-in-class technology to what's already an advanced society.
That makes me think about, the data, which, something which, is relevant for all of you in terms of, data privacy. And, if somebody uses any of your, products, there's a lot of information which you're privy to. What is the stand that, someone like Whisper or Fireflies, how are you handling the data part of, privacy, and how are you guarding that? Tanay?
So for Whisper, privacy isn't something we add on. It's a core foundation of how the company is built, because people use Whisper for their most confidential, personal, and professional conversations. Yeah. And so there's two things that are really important as we think about it. Number one is when we deploy to enterprises, making sure that Whisper is not training on their data. That is
Okay.
something that makes them feel a deep level of trust. And so that has gotten us to deploy in some of the largest banks and law firms and hospitals around the world. The second thing, and this is when we think about India, sovereignty of data is really important. And so one of the big initiatives we have is setting up our warehouses and edge computing and all of that here in the country. And that would just enable both a
Has
much
that always
greater
been the
experience
case,
for
or
people.
you've recently done that change?
This has always been a top of mind priority.
Okay.
And again, we're a small startup, so we've been like, taking problems as they come. This is going to be one of the next big things we invest in, as we have been seeing kind of massive scale in India, and the market has proven itself, and so we want to just be a lot more deeply engaged here.
What about you, Krish?
So I speak with CIOs on the regular, executives on the regular, as they are evaluating different platforms. And meetings are extremely confidential, extremely sensitive. And as we even go beyond meetings into other conversational sources, like Fireflies today does your meeting notes, but then it can also organize your emails and draft emails for you. So all of that is extremely sensitive information. And we took a unilateral approach very early on, saying we will not train on customer data
Is
by default.
that something that you want to position yourself differently from the model companies? And is that an advantage, if at all?
Yeah, for us, that was something that we just chose after speaking to a lot of customers, and as we started going up market, we realized like the importance of how important that is. But that's only one of the factors, because there's a lot of companies, if you go into any of the AI tools you're using, go look at their terms of service. Are they actually saying that they don't train on your data, or do you have to opt out? So there's a lot of that is very important, and there's going to be legal precedents set based on this. But the other part to it is not just in terms of positioning and are you using customers' data to build models, are you training anonymized models? Keep that all aside. The other part is people want control over their data. And so our positioning was really around you deserve to have your own data, you control it, you can delete it at any point in time. We also rolled out private storage so you can store the data on your own storage servers, storage systems. And also, having had the chance to work on all of these enterprise capabilities over the last 5-6 years, we realized like the importance of access controls, guardrails, and a lot of companies don't want 10 recordings of one meeting with 10 different employees out in the wild. A lot of CIOs want audit logs. They want control over where can I access this information and who has privy to this information. So it's been an evolution. It doesn't, like Tanay said, doesn't happen on day one, but it is something that we've had to do in order to win the trust of a lot of large companies and a lot of large enterprises in many different industries.
I think, Krishna, you may want to add to this because you were just telling me how you have everything stored, locally, and that's actually one of the USPs for what you do.
Yeah, I think if Krish and Tanay want to keep things secure, they could use SEMA. So that's a plug for the company. But broadly, I think there is going to be a significant awakening on IP and IP rights protection. Today, AI is fairly unregulated.
Yep.
Right? And I think governments are going to step in, enterprises are going to step in. There are going to be policies in terms of what stays on device, what goes to the cloud, what's shared with policy engines. I think there's a natural world of where I think innovations happen in the cloud. I bring an analogy to drones. Drones have been around for 25 years. But the FAA, which is the governing authority in the US, still is yet to put a government policy on drones. It's 25 years of drones. We don't have a policy of what drones can be near an airport, right? So governments take 25 to 30 years to lag behind technology. And as long as VCs keep funding companies, the governments still have in a continuous running mode to catch up. Privacy is going to become a very defining element for AI. And I think from our perspective, as it comes to personal security on medical records or enterprise AI data, I think you're going to see a very significant divide of what stays in the edge or in the physical world, and how the protection environment is quite different than what's going on.
You've named your company SEMA with that
so
wordplay.
I've done a terrible job naming the company and not explaining it. So SEMA in Sanskrit or Hindi is edge, and I've obfuscated that to really mean boundary or edge, if you will.
Shailendra, I'm going to ask you a tough question.
What's new?
No, I mean, I know you're doing a lot of, US investments in AI. What do you see in India AI deal flow, which is missing at this point? And why would an investor like you, who's raised a fund for India, actually do more US than India at this point?
Well, first,
That's an excellent question, by the way.
we are insanely committed
What
to
are you
India.
telling your LPs, considering all the money that you've got is not for Tanay, but actually somebody sitting in Bangalore?
Well, I think first, actually, let's unpack that into a few parts. And you made certain sweeping statements
Which is why...
which you don't have data to support, which you don't have data to
get-
support, which is data about my business that you claim to know better than me. Well, I'll start there.
You have 5 minutes.
First, we are extremely excited about wanting to make very long-term investments in India so that India can be at the frontier in AI. But let's just be very clear, we are far away from that. We are extremely far away from that. And I'd say, so
when you
far
say
those last couple of
we,
years,
you
India
mean,
is,
okay, yeah.
India is.
Yeah.
And I think for the first 2 or 3 years in this cycle, and again, I'll reiterate, it's changing so fast. I think for the most part, people have been very far behind in their thinking, execution, and so on. Just the pace at which, I mean, if you were to look at how rapidly Tanay is going and hiring absolutely world-class talent to the team, the way companies are being built is different. Honestly, if we didn't learn and work with the very best people in the world, I don't think we'll do a good job for founders in India. So for us to be a very good partner to the best founders in India, we must ourselves have direct experience of working with the best founders in the world. Otherwise, at least, so that's first our view. Second, look, yesterday I was in Bangalore. I spent time with the Sarvam team. They're the leading model company. We were seed investors in it. I spent time with Agrani. They're building GPUs in India. 2 days ago, I spent time not in person, but on Zoom, but a company building space stuff in India. Very interesting things are happening, and we're on it. But we also, would like to back world-class companies, and I think that's the push we are trying to make as best as we can. Now, let's talk a little bit more about India, because I think one thing we have not covered, we have only 4 minutes left. I think one critical thing we are not yet talked about on this panel is, look, where will the value sit in AI? In prior generations, the value sit at the application layer. Hardware got commoditized, infrastructure got commoditized. Those were considered low margin businesses. All the value was in the application layer company. It goes back to this idea that writing software was very expensive, very difficult. Changing software was even harder. People were locked into these years of poor, terrible, old software. Once you flip that on its head, and software is now fungible, and software can be rewritten, replatformed, etc. very quickly, and the core thing you're selling is intelligence and not workflow, system of record and data, the value starts to shift to the infrastructure layer, to silicon, to the people who are going to run compute. And the primitives for AI are compute and power. Okay, what do you need to substitute human intelligence for machine intelligence? You need tons of compute and you need tons of electricity at cheap cost. Actually, surprisingly, India is doing well on cost of power, and the cost of data center build out in India and maintaining it and running it is actually quite attractive compared to many other countries. There is a chance that we may see a monster build out of data center capacity in India in the next 5 or 10 years. It could be the most defining thing from an India AI perspective we all talk about. And so we're spending a lot of time on that. And I don't know if you have all the answers, but we're trying to learn. So I think, but we should talk about, because look, there are now $14 trillion market cap companies in the world. And some of the newer ones in Asia, particularly TSMC is Asia's most valuable company now. Everybody knows about SK Hynix and Samsung and how insanely profitable
But what happens to some of these companies is also dependent on the continuous growth in the model companies and the fact that you would keep, and enterprises would keep putting the kind of monies which was already being questioned, right?
Step back. The core primitive is, do you believe human work will get to some degree substituted or aided with AI work? And if you believe that in the future that machines will be able to do a lot of what humans do today, and humans might do, first I hope millions of more people become founders,
Which
And-
is, so, I mean, I know we just actually have to wrap up now. But just one last question, and maybe all of you can sort of give me an answer. Where do you see, besides the model companies, the large value creation happening? I know, Shailendra, almost, you said infra and app layer, right? Is that your
No,
answer?
I'm saying that I think the value is getting inverted, quite possibly, sustainably, for some foreseeable future. A lot more value may sit. A few things in app layer will be amazing.
Yeah.
But if you thought of the whole industry, it's possible that for the next 5 or 10 years, we will see disproportionate value creation in all things that enable extraordinarily large amounts of compute and intelligence, including at the edge and including in data centers, to come online and do the work of humans in many ways, whether it's driving cars, or it's robotics, or it's other things, or it's, voice AI.
Correct.
Yeah, I just want to add.
Very quick, because we're out of time.
Okay.
Yeah. Where do you think the biggest value creation, 100 billion?
So on that part, I don't think it's binary. You're going to see Anthropic and OpenAI go up the stack, and you're going to see great application layers go down the stack. I like to think of model and energy as like the refrigerator, and you'd think all the value would go to a refrigerator, but at the end of the day, it went to the application, which was Coca-Cola. So I'm going to root for application, but there is entire value to be created everywhere.
I think you're going to have a lot more verticalized companies, given how quick and easy software is to build. And so I actually think more companies are going to exist across the stack. That's going to get you to have far lower costs overall. And companies can start at any layer in the stack. Anthropic started at model layer, got into product. They might get into hardware later on. Who knows?
Krishna?
Yeah, so I think the analogy I draw is early 1900s, everybody invested in car engines. That's, to me, model investment today. Eventually, the folks that make the money are the guys that make the cars. Right? Customer outcomes are going to drive the majority of the value going forward.
I should just say, even more money is made by the people who sell the fuel.
All right, on that note, thank you so much, everybody. Thanks a lot.
I'd like to request our moderator, our speakers, to maybe come together for a group photograph. Yes. Could we all come together for a group photograph? That would be nice. Let's have a big round of applause. A riveting session, to say the least. And I have to say, no doubt, Krishna, you would rock it in a leather jacket, though we like the suit look. Let's have a big round of applause, please, ladies and gentlemen. And now, from artificial intelligence, I think we're going to move to a different kind of intelligence. And I'm literally talking about the youth of our country, who are frequently described as the future of our country. And yes, they are. They're the future of politics. But with their already growing influence at the ballot box, they are helping determine our present already. So what's happening right now is that as a new generation of voters is joining the fray, they are bringing different expectations to public life. And the question is that, is India's political leadership changing with it? And what will it take for more young people to really move from political participation to political leadership? Well, ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to our next fireside chat. On target, the youth vote. Is India ready for a generational shift in politics? At the center of what promises to be a truly wonderful conversation is a leader whose own journey has taken her from the sporting arena to public office. An Olympian and an international trap shooter, she now serves as Minister of Sports and IT, Government of Bihar. So with a big round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Shreyasi Singh. And joining her and moderating this conversation is ET's own Nidhi Sharma. Please welcome both of them to the stage. A louder round of applause, please, everyone. It's an honor to have you here, and we're looking forward to this conversation.
Welcome to the World Leaders Forum, Shreyasi. My first question.
Thank you, Nidhi, but let me first thank you and the Times Group for giving me this opportunity to not just speak for myself and my journey, but to also speak about what's happening in Bihar and where Bihar is going now. So thank you.
We are very eager to hear your views as a minister, as a sports person, and as a person who is carrying forward the family's name in politics. So my first question, Shreyasi, please tell us, how did you, become a sports person? Your father was in the Rifle Association, heading the Rifle Association. But how was it? Was it a natural progression?
See, my father always motivated us into doing what we wanted to do. And he always kept us very sporty or outdoorsy, if I may say so. And he was, I naturally had an instinct for sports. So even when I was in school, I would continuously be looking out on the sports field of what activity is happening. I became my junior sports captain, my senior sports captain. So I was always inclined towards sports. He was the president of National Rifle Association, but let me tell you, when I went to him and I said that I want to start shooting, he looked at me and he said, well, if you want to start shooting, then you need to do it like everybody else did it in India. So I'm not going to help you in any way. So I said, okay, Dad, but then I need to buy a gun. I need a gun to start shooting with. So he looks at me and he says, you think everybody in India starts with their own gun? I said, no. So what do? I said, well, they borrow, they beg. I don't want to use the third word. But so he looks at me, he's like, yeah, exactly. So go to the shooting range and beg or borrow. So I looked at him astonishingly and I'm like, but you're the president. And he's like, yeah, I'm the president of the NRAI, but here I'm your father. So you go to the range, and I kid you not, I won my first Commonwealth Shooting Championship in 2010. And that was India's first Commonwealth Shooting Championship medal. It was a silver medal. And even that I won with a borrowed weapon. And, so that was his teaching style, and that's the sort of moralistic values that he's instilled in us.
And from the shooting range, the decision to join politics, how did that happen?
Well, like I was talking about sports, I was also always inclined towards politics also. I saw this sort of respect and love for my father amongst the people of Bihar. And that is the kind of person that I wanted to become. I didn't know whether it was through politics, but as I grew older, I understood that politics is one way to do that, to give back to your state, to give back to the people, and to earn that sort of, respect that is reciprocal, and that love also. So through his time as a politician, I saw that it's not just party-based politics or ideology-based politics. It's actually a lot based on development, the kind of work that he did, which is why when he contested independently also, he was able to secure a winning margin, and then come back to the Lok Sabha. Having said that, Nidhi, let me also go ahead and tell you this, that while my father contested from a seat known by the name of Baka, I stepped into politics 10 years after his demise. So just to bracket my coming into politics under his name or my family legacy would be a little unfair to my own, form of working or my own achievements that I've made in the field of shooting and thereafter in politics. So I just want to put this out there because, a lot of times what happens is when you speak at public forums or when you ask these questions, to the audience it feels like you're narrowing it down to okay, father was a politician, so daughter or son just, inherited that legacy. I contest from a seat that was never a part of the Baka Lok Sabha. And he was in the center, a different seat. I'm in the state, different seat, 10 years apart, both of our, political careers, so to say.
So what I always find interesting is whenever children of politicians step into politics, they're always compared with their parents. How difficult is it? We always feel that, their initiation in politics, because they've learned at the they've followed in the footsteps of their parents. They've learned in a household which is steeped into politics. You actually know that there is nothing called privacy, right? So, but nobody actually appreciates there is a constant comparison with the parent. How she speaks, what she speaks. She's not like her father. She's not. Her mother would get up in the morning, tend to 20 things, and it's a different ball game. Did it come your way too? The constant comparison. And Digvijay ji was a socialist. He was George Fernandez's closest aide, and then he fought on that Samta ticket, and then he went on. So has there been a comparison?
Of course. I mean, there's always a comparison. And there is not just a comparison that comes from an outside world where people are judging or questioning you, but the challenge is that you yourself as a daughter or a son are also constantly comparing yourself to how great your father or your mother were, and then trying to fill those shoes. And that's really where the challenge comes. I don't think I'm even half the person that my father was, because he was a great, for me, he's my God, right? So for me to compare myself to that level, and then to, try and prove every time, and with that constant, self-awareness and questioning that you're putting yourself through, there is, of course, a third eye or a perspective that comes from the society, which is also doing and possibly judging you in the most negative, way possible. So these things are there. But the right way to do it, or the right way to look at it, is there does not need to be a comparison. There needs to be, a flow of careers where the path is not broken. My father always taught me, he said, Tracy, Rajniti mein aana, but jis din tum Rajniti mein आओगी, उस दिन मैं राजनीति छोड़ दूंगा. परिवार के सब लोग एक साथ राजनीति नहीं कर सकते. And he also said, अगर राजनीति में आना तो दूसरे किसी भी क्षेत्र में, choose a field. It can be academic, sports. He didn't know that I'm going to make it to the Commonwealth Games. He didn't know that I'm going to make it to the Olympic Games. But he always said कि किसी भी क्षेत्र में पहले खुद कुछ बन जाना, उसके बाद पॉलिटिक्स में आना, उससे तुम्हारी जो भावना, जो सेवा और जो ईमानदारी की भावना है, वो कहीं ना कहीं protected रहेगी. So when you come into politics, everybody wants to come into politics and, serve the nation, serve the state, serve the people. But somewhere along the path, a few people get a little, misguided, I would say. But if you've already established yourself in one field, and if you come into politics through that, then there is a sense of security that I have done this, and I can do this, and I can be that honest politician that my people truly deserve. And that's what's most important.
So you said son or daughter. I'm going to stick to the daughter. And what is it like to be a woman in politics?
That's a tough question. Well, it's as difficult as being a woman in any field. And I see you as a journalist. I'm sure you have your shared, struggles. And it's the same thing. So many times you're voicing your opinion out. You're coming from an agency, a thought, and you're trying to voice your concern out, you're trying to tell your opinion, but there are so many men in the room and they're just like, 1 minute. And that 1 minute hurts you like it's crushed your soul, right? I can't put it in words, but it is like that. But one day, women like you, women like me, and all the lovely ladies who are in this room together, I'm sure there's a point where we've all, spoken over the hand. And we've said, nahi, 1 minute nahi, आप 1 minute रुकिए, मैं कुछ बोल रही हूँ. So it's that challenge of being a woman is in every field. I face those challenges even in the sporting world. I see those challenges every day as a politician. I see those challenges every day when I talk to the women who are who are homemakers in the constituency, in the rural areas of Bihar, and they have their own set of challenges. So इस पितृवाद से ग्रसित जो समाज हमारा है, उससे हर एक महिला लड़ाई लड़ रही है, और कहीं ना कहीं वही एक लड़ाई है जो आज मुझे और आपको ये मंच सजा कर देती है, जहाँ पर हम महिला सशक्तिकरण या विमेन एम्पावरमेंट के बारे में बात या अपना ओपिनियन रख सकते हैं. So like I always say, just keep fighting the good fight.
Is politics more unkind to women? We don't have many women there.
I think politics is unkind to every politician. Nobody really looks at politicians and look at the work that they put in. The narrative, unfortunately so, is set up in such a way that you will always see a politician and you will be like, हाँ नेता है सफ़ेद कुर्ता पजामा पहनता है फॉर्च्यूनर पे चलता है, right? And you know, you look at the, because you're in the public eye all the time and you are a public servant, but it's always very unforgiving, it's always very thankless. And nobody really tells you that I woke up at 6 a.m. in the morning, I went to bed at 2:30 a.m. and I did not get any sleep, but I was working. I head the industries department in the government of Bihar. And I say this with confidence that not a lot of sarkari offices are open on Saturday, Sunday. But more often than not, the industries department in the government of Bihar is open on Saturdays and Sundays because that's how much we are working. Because that's how much we understand that there is a lag between Bihar and India. And of course, more so when we talk about at the World Forum. But even to make up with India, we need to work even more harder. So I think it's not just women politicians. I think unkindness is a word that's attached to every politician. You know, one little slip of tongue, one little dress mishap, anything small, it becomes such a huge thing. And people forget that politicians are also humans. They will err, right? And there needs to be an eye that looks at them in that manner also. So it's not just the women. I think the men face it too.
So, Shresi, stepping into politics and choosing BJP, why the choice of BJP in a state where BJP has been for decades? When you stepped, this isn't your first election, right? So when you stepped in, it was always the junior partner of JDU. So why the choice of a party? And when did that decision point come of stepping into politics?
Okay, so I'll take your second question first. The decision of coming into politics was what happened. In 2019, I was offered a ticket. I'm not going to give out any names, but for the Lok Sabha election. I denied that, and I said that I want to still try my hand at the 2020 Olympic Games, because the 2019 was the year when the Olympic team gets decided for 2020. Unfortunately, I did not make it to the Olympic Games in 2020, and of course, COVID hit. While COVID hit and it shut the doors on our houses, I shut the door on my opportunity, but what it did open was the whole spectrum of social media. So everybody was doing all these conferences, conclaves, one-on-ones, online, live media. And that's when I saw that there was a huge influx of a lot of youth of Bihar, not just the women, but also the boys of Bihar, who kept saying, ki Didi, aap politics mein aiye, politics mein aiye. And because 2019 had already shut that door on me, when 2020, that door sort of opened up again in a different way for the Legislative Assembly, I said, you know, this is an opportunity that should not be missed. Because if I don't do it, then somebody else will. And with the way it's been done, the boys and girls of Bihar are not very happy about it, which is why they are asking me to come. So that was a sort of change in, that is a way that I took the decision, because I was out of the Olympic Games. I had just won the Commonwealth Games in 2018, so things were looking right. It looked like the right time to step into politics. That's how I got to it. Why I chose the BJP is because right from 2014 is, I think, when we all started to read up a lot more on the BJP ideology and how we're all patriots at heart, but what the national ideology says. And I saw myself being more aligned to that thought process. While it was in the role of a younger brother, like you said, in Bihar, I also felt the need of BJP growing in Bihar. And if I could be a part of that growth, if I could, sort of ride the train alongside them or everybody, then that will give me, that will give me greater pleasure than anything else. And that's how I decided to join the BJP. I felt like the BJP ideology was more in tune of what the state and the nation needed or needs at in the current scenario. And that's how it was. It was not a very difficult decision to make, frankly speaking, because you know, when you're studying, when you're in a household where different ideologies are discussed. My father was a socialist leader, like you said. My sister did study at the JNU. My mother has always been a staunch right wing. So I did come from a family background of not just politics, but also a family that discusses political ideology over dinner tables. So I had a very open mind as to which way I want to go, but I felt at heart that I'm more aligned to the BJP ideology, and that's how I took that decision.
So when I look at your portfolios, and second-time MLA, portfolios are what? Youth, your sports, this thing, and industries, right? Sports, I would definitely associate with you as for sports person. Father has been National Rifle Association president. Industries, Bihar. And we're very happy to have you here because we want the state, Bihar, to be in the forefront. What has gone wrong in Bihar's story, and how are you bringing investments to the state?
So I'll tell you, and I say this so a few people who have heard this, please don't punish me on repeating my line, but Bihar has been a victim of narrative. The narrative for Bihar is set so poorly that people don't trust in Bihar. And I'm here to make people find that trust in Bihar. हम बिहार को अधिकांश समय टीवी के माध्यम से देखते हैं और टीवी या सोशल मीडिया के माध्यम से देखते हैं. And whatever comes on our algorithm is what our mindset is set on. I would ask the people in this room to raise your hand if you've ever been to Bihar. Right? And all of you have successfully, securely, safely finished your trip. Show of hands. Everybody did that, right? So when Bihar is safe, Bihar is secure now. And that is the kind of comfort that the industries department is offering. A lot of our policies that now give, we give almost free land for up to 10 acres if you're providing employment growth of 1,000. For 25 acres, it's the same process. We are giving interest subvention up to 40 crores. We are giving SGST reimbursement. So there are all these beautiful policies that are on paper, and that Bihar is now a reality in Bihar. But because the narrative is set poorly, a lot of people have this hesitation of coming to Bihar. But to all those people who raised their hands here and to all those people who have been to Bihar, that narrative has changed for them. They willingly come to us and say that, yes, we want to invest in Bihar, and you have the finest policy. I challenge you today. You look at our BIIPP policy of 2025, which is in order today. I challenge you to compare it with any other state. It's the finest policy that's made on paper, and it's the finest industries department that's working in India today. So, having said that, नीति और नियत जब सही होती है, तो वो बदलाव देखने के लिए धरातल पर मिलता है. अगर बिहार की बात करें तो बिहार आज बदलता हुआ इसीलिए है क्योंकि हमने महाराष्ट्र में बड़ी-बड़ी बैग्स कंपनी का वहाँ पर जो लोग फैक्ट्री अपना लगाते थे उस फैक्ट्री को हटाकर बिहार लाने में सफलतापूर्वक हमने सुनिश्चित किया और आज जो मुजफ्फरपुर की बैग क्लस्टर की कहानी है वो आज भारत की सबसे is one of the most successful bag clusters industry in India, not just in Bihar today. We have managed to allot land in 24 hours in Bihar. हमने एक मैन्युफैक्चरर को इंडस्ट्रियलिस्ट को 24 घंटे के अंदर ज़मीन दिखाकर उसको ज़मीन अलॉट करने का काम किया है. That's the pace that we are working at. We have from the inception of putting the thought of putting an industry in Bihar to the production, we have managed to achieve that in 55 days, and that's a record in India, not just in Bihar. So that's the pace that we are working at. I already spoke about how my department is working Saturdays and Sundays to generate that sort of not just trust, but to also make the right policies and to make sure that we can gain that trust back onto Bihar. हम एक ऐतिहासिक धरती से आते हैं, हम एक पावन धरती से आते हैं, और कहीं ना कहीं, and I am a political person, so I have no hesitation in saying this, but कहीं ना कहीं वो जंगल राज जिसकी चर्चा आज बिहार के बारे में होती है, वो सच्चाई थी. बिहार में इंडस्ट्रीज थे, लेकिन उन इंडस्ट्रीज को लूटा गया, इस वजह से वो वहाँ से भागे. हमारे पूर्व मुख्यमंत्री नीतीश कुमार जी को जब बिहार मिला, तो मूलभूत सुविधाओं के साथ उनने बिहार में घर घर बिजली पहुंचाया, सड़क पहुंचाया, पानी पहुंचाया, राशन पहुंचाया. आज जब मूलभूत सुविधाएं बिहार के घर घर तक पहुंच गई हैं, the next step comes on bringing industries, because when industries come to any state, that's exactly when the economic agenda of the states also gets met. I am not saying, see, you heard our Honorable CM Samrat Chaudhary ji speak yesterday, right? We are tirelessly working to create job opportunities within Bihar. Now, this is not to say that we want to confine the youth of Bihar and to keep them in Bihar, but we are trying to say that we want to give an honest choice to the people of Bihar to whether work in their state, and if they so feel like, they can also leave the state. But that choice needs to be made, that opportunity needs to be delivered, and which is exactly what the government of Bihar or the industries department is working on.
You have been in the government. When I say you, when I say BJP, even if it was a junior partner, for how many years? It's been Nitish Kumar
In Bihar?
Yeah, in Bihar.
Well, on and off, because, because the alliance did break a couple of times in the middle.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So what I mean was, kami kahan reh gayi?
I'll tell you.
You asked the audience that, have you finished your trip safely? But Shreyasi, that's the lowest common denominator, right?
No, it's not. I'll tell you why. Because people judge Bihar that way. The songs that are being told about Bihar on the social media platform, the movies that are made of that Bihar-Jharkhand belt, that's the narrative that's set, right? And the question arises is, see, that's not the reality. That's purely entertainment at this point. So don't judge us. You watch the film, you listen to that music for entertainment, but don't judge the state based on that. Why I said I briefly answered your question, but I'm going to go more into details of it. When an industry comes to Bihar, what do they first want? Security. We've provided that. Secondly is they need to transport their products, right? Whatever they're producing, that needs to get out of Bihar. You need better road infrastructure, you need better airports, you need dry port facility, you need irradiation centers, and that all is a part of Bihar today. Where we lacked was, अगर हमारे पास roads नहीं होंगी, तो हम industries को बुलाकर क्या बोलते? तो हमारी पहली जो प्राथमिकता थी, वो तो सड़कें बनाने की थी, जो हमने किया. So where those 15-20 years went were actually in that, which is what I said. The मूलभूत सुविधाएं, the basic necessities and the needs of people in Bihar, that is what we were meeting. Earlier, Bihar and the word loading was sort of, parallel to each other. Now it's history. Bihar is empowered in power. So we can call any industrialist, not just give him the best rates in power possible, but also ensure that we have a 24-hour power available. A lot of people have shut down their gen sets and their generators. That Laltan is not there in Bihar anymore. And that's the truth. So where the 15-20 years went is the 15-20 years went in that, in providing the basic necessities to the people of Bihar, and to also ensure those necessities were then expanded, and we could have delivered those promises to the industrialists who were coming to Bihar. And now is the time. See, there's 15 seconds on the clock, so I'll just really quickly say this. I'm not asking investors to come and merely invest in Bihar. I promise you on this stage that by the time we are facing the next state elections, Bihar is going to be one of the most talked about industries sector in the world, not just in India. And I am expecting, or rather I am promising all of you to partner with Bihar and not just merely invest in Bihar. That's the goal.
Thank you so much. A politician who sticks to time, a stickler for time. Thank you so much, Shreyasi. It was lovely talking to you.
Thank you for having me. Thank you. Thank you all for being such great audiences. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Can you please, yes, come together for a nice group photograph. Let's have a loud round of applause. Such a refreshing conversation and a very candid and spirited one. Let's keep that applause coming, ladies and gentlemen. A warm round of applause for Ms. Shreyasi Singh. And thank you so much, Nidhi, for steering that conversation so wonderfully. So lovely to have heard that very, as I said, candid perspective on what generational change in Indian politics might actually demand. Lovely to hear about her journey as well. And we're getting set for our next panel, in which we come back to how we started this morning, but from a different tack. Ladies and gentlemen, coming up, we have a session on securing digital India, the next cyber challenge. So now we're turning our attention to cybersecurity and really to a very simple reality that we all live in, that the more digital our lives have become, the more there is to secure. Every new service, every connected device, and every AI-enabled system creates new capabilities for all of us, right? Makes our lives easier, but it can also create another point of vulnerability. So ladies and gentlemen, hence cybersecurity increasingly has to work across two worlds at once. This is, of course, the systems that businesses depend on and the technology people carry and use every day. So before I introduce and I welcome our esteemed panelists to the stage, I'd request all our guests to please take their seats. And you've been a fabulous audience. You've kept your phones on silent, so thank you so much for your cooperation. People in the hall as well, everyone, please take your seats. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, this brings us to our next panel, Securing Digital India, the next cyber challenge. Joining us are, welcome back to the stage, by the way, President and Chief Executive Officer of Arctic Wolf, Nick Schneider. Welcome back. We missed you, so we got you back on stage. Co-founder and India President of Nothing, Akis Evangelidis. Director General of CERT-In, Dr. Sanjay Bhal. Founding Director of Bharat Gen, Professor Ganesh Ramakrishnan. And President, Microsoft India and South Asia, Puneet Chandok. Moderating this discussion is ET's Himanshi Lochab. So ladies and gentlemen, please, a warm round of applause. Welcome our panelists and our moderator to the stage. We're looking forward to an absolutely cracker of a session. It's over to you. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. I know the hunger for food is already setting in, and cyber as a subject can really add to that fatigue. But we'll try to keep it nice and fun. As journalists, I noticed something different today. We always count the number of times a person has said AI in their session. Today, I counted the number of times a person has said cybersecurity. You know how much it was? 43 times in 20 minutes. I think that explains the gravity of situation that we're in, right? So, Nick, I want to start with you, right? We heard you earlier in the day today where you talked about how cyber attacks are getting faster, more accurate, and even more economical, right? So from your vantage point, right, a company which has been running SOC for almost 10 years, tell us what is the behavior that you're seeing by AI agents in your threat assessments?
Yeah, so I think there's a number of different lenses to view this question, right? So I think agents in general with an organization are deployed for a specific set of tasks. Those tasks can vary in their risk profile. I think agents deployed for cybersecurity are interesting in that they can do a certain subset of the tasks. Typically, they're the lower level tasks like triage. But what makes a cybersecurity operation or a company as a whole more protected is in understanding kind of the broad breadth in which these agents are being deployed, what they're doing, what they're not doing, and trying to establish the guardrails to ensure that they're doing what you'd expect them to do and are achieving the outcomes that you'd expect to get from them. I think a challenge for most organizations right now is in the balance between allowing your employees and your organization to innovate while still securing and putting up guardrails for the manner in which that innovation takes place, in particular with regards to use of AI. So where we've seen organizations struggle is in that balance and in setting up those guardrails while simultaneously not having a background in cybersecurity, right? So asking a healthcare organization or a manufacturing organization to deploy these agents, but then also think about how to deploy them securely or how to leverage those agents for cybersecurity in their infrastructure when cybersecurity isn't a core to who they are as an organization. So typically what we see organizations wrestling with is, how do I get these agents deployed? How do I make use of these agents either for cybersecurity or for general efficiency within my business? But how do I do it in a way that I, as a practitioner of a more common business, do it without implying or introducing a ton of additional risk to my organization? And I think it's in between those questions that we see challenges within organizations. So they deploy too quickly, they haven't put any guardrails up, and AI starts operating in a way that it shouldn't. AI is deployed too quickly. It's not really thought of as a different identity or a different individual within the organization. So it's allowed to do things that it probably shouldn't. And then I think now there's kind of this difference between, do I leverage AI for security, or do I need to build security for the AI that's being used in my organization? And all of these conversations, I think, are pertinent to the way in which businesses are running their operation.
Right. Yeah. I mean, 2026 cybersecurity is really having a moment, and like you said, it's more of a boardroom conversations now among CEOs, right? Puneet, I want to come to you. Microsoft is really at the center of deploying AI, from Copilots to Azure AI, right? What is your observation? Are you seeing that human in the loop is really failing to keep pace with how fast the attack surface is expanding?
Listen, first up, humans in the loop is not failing. I think it's being poorly used. It was never supposed to be humans on every keystroke. It's all about setting up boundaries and not every action. Like the metaphor I use is, you look at how we manage traffic, you don't put a traffic cop in every car. That just won't work and it won't scale, right? And you define the lanes and you define the rules and the policies and the cameras and the exceptions. That's what humans are supposed to do, right? So we don't need a faster human. We need proper boundary conditions. And boundaries mean three things. You need to have identity. Like we have human capital nowadays in companies, you also have token capital. Every human has a badge, access, you can revoke it. Agents don't have that yet. So making sure every agent in the organization has an identity, containment, like really thinking about the blast radius, defining that upfront versus figuring it out later. Observability, like if you don't know, if you can't trace back what the agent did, you will not be able to pull it off, right? So I think it's not failing, it's being poorly used. And if you do this with the guardrails and the right boundaries with identity, observability, containment, then I think we'll be able to scale it much better.
But are clients worried about the gravity of the situation that we're in, especially large enterprises, Indian enterprises, legacy banks, power infrastructure companies? What are they telling you right now?
Listen, you said 43 times in 20 minutes, right? So I think the two topics that every board today in the country, every CEO in the country will talk to us is AI and security, and rightly so. In fact, I was with a CISO recently and he said, my CEO and my board is asking me to drive the car really fast while I'm making the brake. The brake is not there, right? And this brake is also a myth, right? You don't build brakes in cars to slow them down. You build brakes to speeden them up. A Formula One car has an awesome brake because they can move really fast, right? The other problem is you're still looking at security as a percentage of the IT budget. So the AI ambition and the AI projects are going 3x, whereas security is flat. That, I think, is a real defect, right? You really need to think differently. Like, security has to be a percentage of your AI ambition. Security also can't be post facto, right? You have to build this by default. This is going back to the traffic policeman analogy, right? You really can't bolt it on. So as Microsoft, we're doing something called a Secure Future Initiative. We're looking at 100 trillion parameters every day, $20 billion being spent over the next 5 years. All of this is to make sure security is by design, by default, not post facto, and you're not building the brake as you're driving the car.
Yeah, I want to park that thought and I come back to it because you raised something very important. But coming to you, Akis, right, from an edge device perspective, right, edge devices including smartphones, PCs, connected cars, IoTs, do you think they're becoming the weakest link in the attack chain? Can users trust on-device AI?
I wouldn't say it's the weakest link, but definitely the most important, right? Like your smartphone holds basically all your digital identity, right? Like from your photos to your passwords and so on. So I think it's an extremely important part of the overall channel. So I think it's more about when it comes to AI device, to some extent it's slightly more secure because it's on device. But also I think the real kind of dilemma is ensuring that there are the right kind of guardrails around what this kind of your agent can do, and what data also you're willing to kind of feed that AI, because it doesn't need to have a system level access to everything, because that's where things eventually can go a bit rogue. So I think it's ensuring that all those kind of guardrails are around your kind of AI agent.
Right. Dr. Sanjay, I want to come to you. CERT-In has been actively monitoring the threat landscape for Indian enterprises for the longest time. In 2026, tell us what has changed in cybersecurity and your observations.
So there are primarily three things if you look at. It is now AI agents versus AI agents. So the attackers and the defenders both are using AI agents. And they can plan, they can use tools, they can write code, they can carry out multi-stage coordinated attacks. So it becomes very complex. The second part is that these agents now have identities, as was just mentioned. So these identities, if they are compromised, they will bring down entities or organizations at machine speed. And you will have no idea as to what happened. So how do you start securing them? And the third is that AI is now part of your attack surface. So whether it is the models, whether it is the agents, whatever the data, whatever you want to say, is part of the attack surface. So these three things were not there prior to 2026. And you have these three things now, and that is what has dramatically changed the whole scenario.
Right. Dr. Ganesh, as a researcher and as someone leading a team training Indic AI models, right? What are your thoughts on where is this agentic AI behavior stemming from? I mean, we have seen rogue agentic AI behavior. The leading labs have talked about it. From a technical perspective, where is this behavior stemming from?
A very interesting question. I'll piggyback on what Puneet said. I think this security needs to be thought of by design and not just retrospect. Now, the strength that AI agents offer today is that domain experts can focus on what. Right? They can be declarative. In fact, it's forcing domain experts to be better at what they are, because they just need to spell out the problem absolutely clearly instead of entangling the what with the how. Now, what is important here is the visibility into the how. And that's where sovereign AI plays a very important role. I mean, that's the reason we as a consortium of 9 academic institutions have India AI mission supported Bharat Gen, so that we view the AI machinery as a glass box. The how becomes absolutely co-owned, bottom-up developed, and we exercise control over it. The challenge in letting the what overwhelm the how is that the end can justify the means. And the rogue behavior is not necessarily rogue by design, right? It's because the end has been prioritized over the means. So the what and the how need to coexist. The glass box view of models along with the declarative power, the what power that these models are giving. I think that's where we actually have a healthy coexistence between the power of these models and cybersecurity.
Right, I agree with your point because when OpenAI also talked about the Hugging Face incident and how the agents were able to leak to the environment was they were told that it is a sandbox environment and you do not have access to internet. And they still believe that this is not real internet. It's still a sandbox situation. So I believe, yes, I agree with your point there. Puneet, coming back to you again, you talked about the cyber budgets, right? Cyber budget as a line item has been really a pain point for any enterprise, whether it's large, mid-market, or small. Are CEOs, CISOs now looking at cyber budgets differently? And do you expect spending on cybersecurity to grow?
I think just to take a step back, Imanji, first, I think Dr. Sanjay said this, which is we're in a world where agents are defending against agents. And I think three things have changed. One is the scale, which is like cybersecurity is having its own industrial revolution. It's no longer handloom, one person, one email at a time. It is at a scale that is quite unprecedented. Speed, like the gap between a vulnerability and an action is a few seconds. And if you're waiting for a human to act on it, you're already obsolete. Third is the surface area. We've spoken about humans and agents, right? Humans have IDs, agent identity is still be worked on. So if you look at these three things, every board is asking us the same question, saying, listen, how do we think about this? Thankfully, the board is talking less about servers, they're talking more about trust, right? And if you just think about India, right, the way we build digital public infrastructure, the scale that we've built, the next challenge for all of us in India is to build trust as a foundation to that, right? And the only way to do this is to make this in a secure way. And again, in a world where agents are working against agents, you have to think about resilience, you have to think about proactiveness. You'll never be perfect, but are you ready for it? And if you're attacked, your ability to resolve it, get back operations quickly and get going, that's the thing that boards are focused on, and rightly so, and we're supporting them to do that.
Right. Nick, do you want to weigh in on that, on the subject of cyber budgets, because you target mid-market. So this is the segment which really is in soup right now on rising cyber budgets. Do you want to weigh in?
Yeah, I think for most mid-markets, small enterprises, I mean, if you spend any time on LinkedIn or reading the news, they're mortified about what they're going to do in the face of unprecedented both volume and sophistication of attacks. I think a lot of the press and a lot of the R&D dollars go into tools and systems that are applicable to a Fortune 500 account or a large government. But for the average organization, they're viewing the problem as very similar to the problem that they were facing previously, but with a much different size and scope. And it's coming at them in real time, right? So, you know, we've recently done some homework on this. The number of critical vulnerabilities being discovered now is like 10x what it was 6 months ago. But equally as important, the time to exploit is 0 or negative. So by the time you understand what the vulnerability is, there's no more time to figure out how to patch it. If you've been targeted, you've been breached. And for organizations that don't have a broad security operation or don't have a budget to be able to implement a variety of different tools, this is a real problem for them. And not only, as we talked about with AI becoming an attack surface, all the previous attack surfaces are still applicable. They're just being attacked now by a much more powerful adversary. So being able to use AI and being able to use these tools in a way that doesn't put the burden of understanding the AI models for security, the training and the tuning and the implementation of these models or tools is really, really critical for these mid-market organizations, because they don't have the ability to say, new threat, new volume, new speed of attack, I'll go hire 15 people to help me figure this out, or to be AI experts within my organization. They have to rely on the vendors and the institutions that they choose to partner with.
Right. Dr. Sanjay, you talked about this being an agent-to-agent era, right? These agents having digital identities. From a common user perspective, of use of a smartphone, of a device, what kind of risks are we looking at? I mean, India as a nation which is being, attacked left, right, and center, phishing has gone up exponentially. So from a common user perspective, what can we expect? And also, Arkis, please do weigh in from a smartphone and device security perspective.
So from a common user perspective, I think it's simple. As you said, phishing is increasing. AI will continue to make sure that phishing becomes more and more difficult to detect, right? Even the best of people who are technologists, etc., are having difficulties figuring out that this is a phishing email. So there will be phishing. They have to be aware of that. Second is there will be a lot of deep fakes. Okay, so you will have audio, images, videos, etc., which are all deep fakes. So one is being aware of them. So there are CERT publishes various advisories and provides details as to what needs to be done in terms of best practices that can be followed. But having said that, on the other side, it is also what the phone providers, as you said, smartphone, they have to start taking certain action on themselves. You can't leave everything on to citizens. It's like saying, okay, I'm giving you a car. It may have brakes, it may not have brakes. It may have airbags, it may not have airbags. You be careful and drive carefully. Is that the right way? The ownership has to go back to the car manufacturers. That you have to do certain things which will ensure that the person who's driving the car is going to be safe. So same way, any digital technology which is being used will have to be ensured by the OEMs that it is safe to use. Whether it is the hardware vendors, whether it is the software vendors, whether it is firmware vendors, etc., whoever.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, even when you look over the last kind of 12 months, it's quite crazy to see the sort of, the scale of the attacks, and as well as how AI has enabled that to be a lot more efficient and sophisticated in the way, right from social engineering or, even phishing, like even friends, entrepreneurs within tech, they've been kind of, they fell for it. It's becoming extremely sophisticated. So I think a lot of work needs to be done on this, especially, from a smartphone standpoint, because eventually we are the gateway into the interface into that. So, a lot of work has been done, whether it's on the hardware level, software, working with all our partners, including Google and Android, to almost kind of detect and use AI in our advantage as well to kind of, as much as AI can, be very sophisticated when it comes to phishing and so on. This can be reverse engineered. So a lot of work has been done there to hopefully, because to your point, it's very important, as a brand to, not put all the accountability on the users, but see what are the safety nets we can also incorporate, especially on the smartphone where all your data are there, and we can also track a lot of things and work again with all our partners to hopefully identify those before it's too late.
Dr. Ganesh, Frontier AI labs are now releasing models in private preview. Anthropic has done that with Mythos. Chinese are also talking about doing something like that, right? Does that create a cyber capability gap for enterprises who have access versus those who don't? And can Indian labs rise up to that to fill up that gap?
Thank you. I think I'll build upon what Dr. Sanjay Behel mentioned, right? The responsibility being on those who design. So India can certainly play a very critical role in designing. And I think, again, going back, right, I'd like to structure it in 4 layers. The first is secure and multi-tier data access. Our Honorable Prime Minister beautifully talked about PLI incentives as against penalties, right? So instead of making the entire security issue penalty-driven, if it's incentive-driven, and you have multi-tier data access, the access control by design also helps ensure, by the way, the amount of data out there on the internet, if it's 22 to 50 trillion tokens, the amount of data logged into enterprises is 1,000 times more. So that's the reason this point number 1 is very important. But I present it as an enabler along the lines of our Honorable Prime Minister. The second point is, how do you then build models? Actually, there's a very, very powerful framework for building models, which is federated learning. Now, what's the idea of federated learning? You bring the algorithm to the data rather than bringing data to the algorithm. It's very important. given the 1,000 times more data logged into enterprises today, we should seriously consider that. How do you bring the weights in a privacy-preserving manner, the weights of the model, of frontier model capability, nothing less than frontier model capability, to the data that is residing privately. We are very happy to share that BharatGen has been leading the way for India's participation in this global alliance called Tapestry. So Tapestry, Jan LeCun has played a very pivotal role there. And we've been actually building models. We have some models being released under that. Now the third part is, well, you have federated learning. But to do that, you also need to ensure that the communication amongst these nodes is secure. Security is at every level, right? Again, to be able to do that, we need to ensure that APIs where possible are facilitated, right? If not the APIs, metadata. The other important thing is you need to have development frameworks that facilitate all of this. So from BharatGen, we have actually released Slakshana from our consortium partner at IIIT Delhi, Professor Bapi Chatterjee. Just look it up. Slakshana is a federated learning framework which has complete security at every level, from communication to computation, for federated learning of frontier models. It's being used extensively. And the fourth is sandboxing, right? With all of this, you still need sandboxing for enterprises, to be able to test out their models. Ayushman Bharat Digital Mission has done a great job there in terms of trying to create that sandbox environment. So I think we need to think constructively on how India could actually show the way, like it did for UPI.
Right. Puneet, sticking to this subject on models being in private preview, do you want to weigh in on, does that create a capability gap? What is Microsoft AI research telling you?
You reminded me of my college class, the way you explained before. So thank you for that, Professor. Listen, I think the core of this is machine-to-machine intelligence and machine-to-machine trust, right? That's the conversation we're having today. And machine-to-machine trust is like, again, another metaphor, right? It's like giving somebody a power of attorney, right? Would anybody in the room today give somebody a power of attorney on your behalf where you don't know what they're authorized to do, you have no log of it, and you can't revoke it? Those are the three questions any lawyer will ask. That's the same three questions any technologist should ask, which is, if I'm working with a machine, I'm trusting a machine to do something, am I clear on the blast radius? Am I clear on the log and what the agent will do? And can I revoke it, right? So I think that is exactly what we're working on, to make sure that trust is built in, to your point, by default, by design, not a bolt-on, because if you do this as a bolt-on, you will miss spaces. I think that's what we committed to do. And going back to just the India story where we started, right, India's digital public infrastructure, I think the next challenge for us as the most dynamic digital economy on the planet is to make sure trust also scales in DPI at that level. And I think that is not a license or a tax, that's the permission slip for us to scale DPI in India.
Right. Sticking to the India subject, Dr. Sanjay, India is becoming the largest digital economy with UPI, Aadhaar, DigiYatra, and everything around that. In simple terms, from a cyber perspective, are we prepared for what's coming with AI? From a national security perspective.
So I think we had a very interesting previous session where you heard about rifle shooting, etc. And so you don't just go and get a silver medal unless and until you have been practicing, right? You have to prepare, you have to practice. So from a scale perspective for India and for national security, we've been trying to do, I'll break it up in, as Professor says, break it up in 3 parts, 4 parts, whatever. So I'm going to try and break it up into 3 parts. We've tried to carry out various drills and exercises and capacity building. That's number 1 bucket. So we've carried out drills and exercises for across sectors for helping them being resilient against frontier AI model attacks. And how do they identify them? What should they be doing? How do they need to change their processes, etc. So we've carried out these drills and exercises across sectors and more than 2,500 participants have been there. More than 400 organizations have already participated. And on the capacity building side, we have launched a course for cybersecurity professionals in AI, along with CISA. And there, this is a specialized course where people can learn how to develop secure models and be responsible for what they are developing. The second part, or the second bucket, is giving out advisories and guidance. So we've given out an advisory on how do you safeguard yourself against frontier AI models and their threats. We published a blueprint as to how do you take care of AI-based vulnerability exploitation. And that is one of the, we've got very good reviews globally for that document, saying that it's a very nicely done, tailored approach, what should be followed, and India has taken the lead. The third, we've given out an advisory also for what the OEMs should be doing. Okay? And the fourth is we have partnered with ANSSI of France to come up with a risk-based approach for AI. And the fifth is we've given technical guidelines as to bill of material for AI. And that helps from a supply chain perspective. And the third bucket is all about technology. So let me shoot out some statistics which I was just jotting down. We have developed and deployed AI-driven situational awareness systems where we have analyzed a year or 2 years back 9,800 billion DNS queries, detecting 2.2 billion linked to malicious domains, of which 128 million were phishing related. And over 3,000 phishing sites were mitigated, which were affecting 695,000 users. And we've also extended the AI-enabled vulnerability assessment for public-facing digital assets in a sandbox environment to detect weak spots and also AI API vulnerabilities. Apart from that,
I'm sorry, I'll have
the
to.
last one is the cyber threat intel platform which we have, where we provide specific threat intel to organizations to protect themselves.
I wish we had more time to continue this conversation. A lot of loose threads pending to cover, but thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us today. It's been an honor to host you at the Economic Times World Leaders Forum. Thank you.
Thank you, Manchi.
What a wonderful session. I think everyone is hungry for lunch because that applause seemed a bit weak. Can you please put our hands together? Thank you so much to our panelists and our moderator. Thank you so much, Mr. Schneider, Mr. Evangelidis, Dr. Bhal, Professor Ramakrishnan, Mr. Chandok, and of course, Himanshi, for really, really steering that session so beautifully. Thank you so much. So, ladies and gentlemen, with that, we break for lunch. It is served at the Pavillion next door. Please come back here because we shall reconvene at 2 p.m. sharp. And we shall again pick up the AI conversation once more. But this time we're going to be looking beyond the generative models and towards the next generation of intelligence systems. So we're looking forward to meeting all of you back here at 2 p.m. Enjoy your lunch. Thank you.